Hello and welcome to the Meet the Parents podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 69 of the Meet the Parents podcast and another half an hour of parenting-based chat. I'm Tim from Slouching Towards Thatcham, and tonight I'm joined by Hannah from Budding Smiles, John from Dad You Geek, and making what hopefully won't be just a one-off appearance after a prolonged absence, Dave from the Dad Venturer. Hello everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
This week we're going to catch up a little bit about what Dave's been up to while he's been away, and then talk about online trolls and freedom of speech. So it's been a while since we've had Dave on the podcast. Last year's pre-Christmas episode, in fact. So let's just spend a few minutes catching up with what he's been up to these past 10 months. So let's start, with the big stuff. In case anyone's been hiding under a rock, you had a small announcement recently, didn't you?
Yeah, I've got herpes.
Lowering the tone, yeah.
Well, it's what I do best, Tim. That's why you've got me back. The announcement was that we are expecting a second child. So scary and exciting in equal measures.
Congratulations and commiserations. Delete as applicable. Do you have any details you want to or are able to share with us? Due date? Gender reveal video?
So due in February next year. We actually had our 20-week scan today. But it's not been the easiest ride so far. There's been a few ups and downs, which means that we had a scan a few weeks ago and found out that it was a boy then. So we've sort of done things slightly different as a result of that, and found out earlier, which is actually a good thing, because today the baby wasn't really playing ball, so we didn't get like a photo and stuff like that because wouldn't sort of turn the right way. So at least we got that a few weeks ago. But main headline is all is good, which is the main thing.
Excellent. How's Hayley doing?
Yeah, she's good. Yeah, I think, being a few years older and no longer her young self that she was, she's finding it a little bit more difficult from sort of like tiredness, and she's had a few issues with her knee and things like that. But on the whole, all good. Cheers.
And how's toddler Elle taking the news? Is she excited? Does she even care?
Yeah, she's really excited, actually. It sort of took a while for her to understand the concept that she'd be having a brother and things, but she does some really cute things now, like hugging Hayley's belly, and she talks about her brother a lot. It's really nice that she's so involved, and hopefully that'll continue. I think it's quite a good age. She's just over 3 now, so I think the understanding's there, and hopefully that'll mean she can be getting nappies and wet wipes and doing all of that stuff for us when baby's here.
Slave labour, it's the way forward. Speaking of Elle, how is she doing, other than wrapping you expertly around her little finger, of course?
Yeah, she's good. I think that sums it up pretty well. She's, as I say, she's 3 now. She's a little whirlwind, great to be around and things. So, yeah, no complaints there.
What's happening with the blog at the moment?
Same old, really. You make it sound like this should be like loads of news I've got, but the truth is, for the past 10 months I've just been doing the same thing that I've always been doing, just getting an extra nap in there during the day and catching up with Breaking Bad.
So now that we've done the mini version of This Is Your Life on Dave and handed him his big red book, let's move on. Only loosely parenting related, but I read a blog post over at Our H Blogs recently where, amongst other things, she talked about how we're now starting to refer to anything that's vaguely negative in our lives as trolling. Now, trolling is one of those words which has developed a meaning all its own in an online context, carrying with it all kinds of unsavoury connotations. Now, with the proliferation of social media in recent years, it's really taken on a life of its own, giving life to a strange breed of user that was formerly restricted to the world of internet discussion forums. So firstly, how would we each define what a troll is?
For me, I think a troll is somebody's targeted and sustained harassment on somebody's social media profile. For me, that's what I view trolling as, is not just a one-off comment, but continued aggression really towards somebody for whatever reason.
I'd agree. I think it's sort of essentially an online version of bullying, really.
Yeah, nothing really for me to add. I think it's that long-term thing. It's the bullying aspect where you're basically just trying to make their life a hell online and hiding behind a keyboard, really.
And I think for me, it's all about, it's designed to provoke a reaction, isn't it? Where, the primary motivation is to cause distress, as you say, bullying, and there's no intention to hold any kind of rational debate. So that's what we think. But I also consulted a slightly more credible source than the four of us, the Oxford English Dictionary, which defines trolling as making a deliberately offensive or provocative online post with the aim of upsetting someone or eliciting an angry response from them. That seems pretty straightforward. So I do think, though, that too many people overuse and misuse the word trolling. They use it to label anyone who disagrees with them or speaks negatively about them. And I don't know about you guys, but for me, that's not trolling. I mean, sometimes it can be, but often I think it's more just disagreement or debate or even constructive criticism, which, in a civilized country, the last time I checked, is what we used to simply call freedom of speech. So when do we think when is a comment or response just negative, and when is it genuinely trolling? Anyone care to draw the line somewhere for it? So, what is and isn't acceptable?
The odd one-off comment or a disagreement, I wouldn't count that as trolling. I mean, I had somebody, when I was pregnant with Martha, I said about how I'd been at the maternity unit and someone had been smoking right outside the unit doors, another pregnant lady, and it had made me feel sick. And I was very, very open about the fact I don't agree with smoking in pregnancy, but I was mainly pointing to the fact that she was smoking right outside the doors of a maternity unit where other pregnant women had absolutely no possible way of avoiding that smoke. And someone started really just disagreeing with me, but then swearing and much more of a verbal attack. I still wouldn't call that trolling, apart from the fact I also know that the same person has basically goes through mummy blogs doing everything she can to disagree and cause arguments. But from my perspective, I just thought she is being provocative. She's trying to cause an argument. That's that. Whereas I think sustained abuse, and I know you said about RH blogs and what she went through on Twitter has been absolutely horrific. That sustained targeted abuse, she went through absolute hell with people this one person threatening her, setting up fake accounts. That's trolling. That's sustained. That is, to somebody who was already feeling vulnerable, that could be enough for them to completely shut down their entire blog and online presence. And I think that's where the line is. Is it someone who's just being argumentative, or is it someone who's actually causing potential damage either physically or emotionally?
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, for someone who isn't as strong and is potentially vulnerable, if someone's put in that situation, it can be potentially quite dangerous, can't it?
Well, I think there's something around intent as well, and it's difficult to know because you can never get in the other person's mind. So it could just be somebody who likes to disagree with people and just isn't able to get their words across in ways without swearing and things like that. So I think ultimately it's difficult to know whether somebody is trolling on purpose or not. So I think intent is a thing. But yeah, as the example that Hannah's used and plenty of other things out there, when you're deliberately doing things above and beyond what you'd, I guess, consider normal social behaviour. And in the real world, if you're, going around to people's houses or doing a bit of a John Travolta in Face Off and changing your, how you look in order to attack someone and all of this stuff, I think it shows bringing it into reality and offline gives an interesting comparison as to how it could be, if that makes sense.
It is such a difficult one, isn't it? Because is somebody just an argumentative type personality, or are they actually setting out to cause harm? And I guess that's why it's quite a difficult one for when somebody is having an issue for the police to prove anything, because it comes under the Malicious Communications Act. So, and that's quite a complex act in itself. So it's really difficult for you to tell if someone's just trying to put their side of the argument across and getting it completely wrong with the language they're using, like Dave said, or are they out there targeting somebody simply with the ultimate aim of causing harm to them?
I think it's quite an interesting thing as well, because we're bloggers and we've put ourselves out there into the world for people to say things about us. So that obviously doesn't warrant people having a go to, wherever this line is, where it's defined based on law and how we see things. But, there is always that argument of, well, if you put yourself out there, like celebrities and stuff, these people are always going to say things about them. It doesn't make it right, but we probably experience more things than your normal person would, just because we're so online and across the internet.
Yeah, and I know in her blog that's exactly the argument that Rach makes, isn't it? If you put yourself out there, then you have to be, in addition to any praise that you get from people, you have to be prepared to take a degree of negativity as well. I think, John, you made the point about it's not always a case of black and white. It can be quite difficult to know exactly where to draw the line, and it's certainly very hard to define in terms of hard and fast law exactly where that line is and when you're on the wrong side of it. And Dave, you used the word intent, and I think I very much agree with that. For me, trolling is all about the intent behind the comment. To Hannah's point, if you disagree with someone politely, that's not trolling. If you disagree a bit more vehemently, I'm not sure that's necessarily trolling either. You might just be rude or a bit of a holier than thou type, but not necessarily a troll. Telling someone that you're right and they're wrong, getting closer, but conceivably that still just falls into the category of being a know-it-all dickhead. But
yeah, it's if they're actually setting out there to cause that distress and anxiety to the person that they're sending it to. That's when I think they cross the line.
There's also the hidden element as well, isn't there? Because a lot of trolls are hidden. It's not, I'm Dave Hornby on the internet who's just going out there and saying things to people. It's hidden behind, fake avatars, fake names, fake profiles, and that's where it's the intent and it's the deliberateness.
As you say, trolls are deliberately trying to goad a response from you, because what they want more than anything else is for you to take the bait. They're not interested in having an argument. They're not interested in proving you wrong. They're not interested in, what they want to do is for you to get so angry that they can take your words and twist them against you endlessly until you just give up. And they are, at least the good ones, are very good at finding every loose thread to unpick. Every time you think you've ended the argument, they'll find a new angle and start it all up again. And I think there's a bit of a misconception online that trolls are stupid people, and usually they're not. A really smart troll is clever enough to outmaneuver you at every turn, not with lies, but by simply twisting everything you say and finding a different way to attack you. And you've got to be pretty smart, actually, to do that effectively in a sustained way. So the advice I'd always give to people is just don't engage with them. Bite your lip, walk away, because there's no point having an argument with them. They will never accept your point of view because that's not what they're interested in.
So here's an interesting one then. So we've obviously talked about us putting things out there and people having a go at us from a troll perspective. What about people, bloggers, Katie Hopkins of the world, who are considered trolls because they put things out there in order to elicit a response? Looking at it from a different perspective, what's your views on that?
You have someone like a Katie Hopkins who is there to deliberately provoke argument and outrage, and is her motivation to wind up individual people, which is usually the case with trolls, or is it actually about outraging people to the extent where they retweet and share everything she says because it's all about driving, it's traffic, it's clickbait? So is clickbaiting actually trolling, no matter how offensive it is?
I think unless it's targeting a person or group of people and potentially causing harm to them, if it's just spouting your mouth and being a complete douche like she is, then I probably would consider that just annoying clickbait as opposed to trolling.
So at what point then does the individual or the group make it trolling? So say, for instance, someone has a go at mummy bloggers in general or daddy bloggers in general. is that trolling? Is that not? Because obviously it's targeted towards a specific group of people with a sort of a set view on things, or take for instance some of the things that happen on like Mumsnet, where certain groups of bloggers are targeted. I don't know what the answer is, but
I wonder if it's just sort of general opinion, then maybe not. If it's go and head over to so and so's blog page and give them what for. I mean, this has happened in things like breastfeeding forums, and someone has commented disagreeing with them, but the person who's disagreed has then copied and pasted a link into a group on Facebook for, say, breastfeeding or baby-led weaning or whatever, and essentially said to all those people in the group, this person saying this that disagrees with what we think, let's all go over there. And you see it, just hundreds and hundreds of comments from people all attacking the blogger who wrote the original article.
I think all of that is a form of trolling, whether it's Katie Hopkins writing a news article on a website, or somebody on a forum, or somebody just sending a direct tweet to somebody. It's all of a different form of trolling.
Yeah, so maybe the definition isn't necessarily about attacking a specific person, but if you're attacking a very specific set of people with the aim of provoking that reaction, and a lot of the stuff you see on Mumsnet does skirt very close to the line. Sometimes maybe it crosses it, maybe not always, but all those am I being unreasonable threads, they certainly invite trolling behaviour, even if they're not directly trolling behaviour themselves.
I just think people need to be more careful about what they certainly are putting. If they're generalising, it's harder for anything to be done about it. But if they start being specific about who they're referring to, then they could find themselves in hot water.
Yeah, but it's a really good question, a really good point that you raised, Dave, because it does underline how difficult it is to put a precise definition on what is trolling and what isn't.
And I think, again, that's where you've got the face-to-face in reality. If someone's shouting at you in the high street and getting in your face and swearing and stuff, that is probably going to be taken more strongly by the police than somebody who says the same things online. And that's just the world we now live in, isn't it? There's this secondary world which is opened up over the past 15, 20 years, and society and the police and government and all of this is just trying to catch up with what that actually is now.
So while we're talking about bloggers, let's pivot slightly. So we regularly debate in blogging forums about whether we should delete negative comments. Not comments that are threatening or profane, but just ones where maybe someone has strongly expressed a contrary opinion. What do we think about this? I mean, yes, if people are threatening or abusive, I can absolutely agree with someone who deletes comments. But if they're just stating an opinion that we don't agree with, should people be deleting comments, or are we just denying those people who are disagreeing their right to freedom of speech?
I think you should keep it up there. To me, like with my blog, and what I try and do is show different perspective on stuff. So if I'm then taking away comments from people who've disagreed with me, or an example being, I wrote something a while ago about where's all the stay-at-home dads on TV. That had a few comments, nothing negative, but just different perspectives of saying, oh well, I think it might be because of this, or are you just creating an issue when there isn't an issue, blah blah blah. And when you've written something, you do look at that and you take that as why are they disagreeing with me? Obviously everyone should agree with everything I say, but taking that away and getting rid of those disconcerting voices, I think isn't something that I personally do, and wouldn't be something I'd want others to do, because it shows, it's the rose tinted glasses thing, isn't it?
I'm all
I
for it.
Agree.
Yeah, if in my view, if it generates discussion on my blog, then that's job done for me, in a way, because I put out there what my thoughts are, and on a lot of my posts, I quite often ask people what they think. I leave them there. Obviously, if somebody starts getting abusive on there, that's a different story. But if it's just a differing view, I'm happy to leave them there.
And I agree. And yeah, for me, it should be pretty straightforward. If the comment's littered with lots of swearing, I'll delete it. If it's abusive or threatening, I'll delete it. Otherwise, I'll let it go. As far as I'm concerned, people are entitled to say whatever they want. And actually, I think that leaving a negative comment up there actually shows that you're the bigger person and you're not afraid, to listen to negative opinions. So each to their own. But I have to admit, I don't understand when people get all wound up about, deleting the first negative comments that does come along. In terms of how you guys have dealt with any negative comments on your blogs, you've not gone and deleted them. So, how do you deal with them? Do you tend to respond to them, ignore them?
I've responded to comments before because I just think, well, if nothing else, I'll thank someone for taking the time to comment and say that it's good to hear different sides of the story and different opinions. And as long as they're not being abusive, then that's fine. I'll be polite and respectful in return.
Same view for me, to be honest.
Yeah, same. I'm really bad at replying to comments, so I'll probably forget to do it. But that's not out of that's not because I'm crying at my computer screen or anything like that. That's just because I'm bad at replying to it. But yeah, I had someone the other day on a slightly different note, and it's happened a couple of times now. On on Instagram, just replied to one of my things saying, "Oh, you're doing too much sponsored stuff. I'm getting sick of this. Unfollow." So obviously, that's not great because it's obviously something I'm conscious of anyway, of finding that balance between paid work and, your normal written work. But instead of deleting the comment, I just messaged him and said, "Oh, sorry about that. It's my job at the end of the day. I don't view it any differently to adverts being in magazines, for instance." To which he replied and said, "Yeah, fair enough. I'll delete the comment." And that to me is a lot better way of dealing with something rather than just deleting the comment, because you've not confronted something, that's the wrong word, but you've talked about it and you've explained your side of things, and then it's up to them what they do with it.
I kind of agree with you. I'm a believer in allowing people their say, and you know what? If people do start to get negative or aggressive, then readers are capable of judging for themselves. And often, if someone moves beyond disagreeing to being quite actively aggressive, you can give them enough rope to hang themselves. Sometimes it just seems like people want to give the impression that everyone agrees with them. I mean, that's just not realistic, is it?
But don't you think that's just that's social media fear? Look at Instagram. Look at how people portray themselves. That's not necessarily reality, is it? And you've got your people on Facebook who are always putting the holiday photos and this, that, and the other, and it's people put themselves in the way that they want to be perceived. So there's probably part of it is getting rid of any of those negative comments or saying about people are trolling me just because they disagree is probably more reflective of them than it is of anything else.
Dave, I know we've talked about this in the past, but I guess I'm thinking particularly about things like product reviews. Very often we read reviews on blogs, and every review you read is gushingly perfect. That it's the best product in the world, and so on. And I would much rather read a review, and you're particularly good at this, about saying that actually, do you know what, I like the product, here are 5 things I liked about it, but here are 1 or 2 things that maybe could be better. And that kind of honesty in a review is something I'm much more likely to trust than one that completely sugarcoats everything, or one where maybe any negative comments are deleted. And I think that's really important because it's much more authentic. And when people presents that kind of insta-perfect life on their Instagram feed, I think we all do that to a certain extent. We want to show the best sides of our lives and maybe be a bit more reluctant about showing the worst side of things. But surely we have to acknowledge that not everything is perfect.
I agree. It's the funny thing you mentioned Instagram. One thing that with Instagram that I do like, and I think it's kind of changed the dynamic of that site, is you've got just the normal picture feed on Instagram, which shows a lot of people's social media and their lives being quite perfect. And then you click on their stories and they've been up all night with the kids. They look like death and they can't speak. They've got no voice, but they're still putting up a story and it's still real. And I think it just brings a different insight, which we never used to have. And I really enjoy that part of it now. And my Instagram story tonight is just me looking at the camera with the women of my household talking about periods just after dinner, which was quite nice and a little bit of an insight into my world.
There's definitely a very distinct difference in personality between regular Instagram and Instagram stories. And Instagram stories, as you say, is almost that kind of, it's like the behind the scenes type of video, isn't it? Where you lift the curtain and you say, actually, do you know what? This is real life. Your story feed is particularly good for that. And Hannah, yours as well. You're not afraid to show what life's like after a tough night with Martha.
No, I don't do sugarcoating. I've not got the time or the energy or the photographic talent to sugarcoat. No, it really is like 1 minute there's a picture of how the kids are being beautiful and snuggly, and then the next there's me downing a bottle of Prosecco because they've been absolute little shits all day. So it really is just a case of whatever I'm feeling in that moment.
Never mind Instagram and blogs. I think a lot of this bad behaviour is probably at its worst on Twitter, where the brevity of tweets enforced by the 140 character limit tends to increase the scope for misunderstanding, and it often leads to responses that are, well, probably not the sort of thing you would say to someone face to face. I mean, there was a recent example about blue cards for boys and pink cards for girls in New Zealand, I think, that Simon was tagged in.
It was actually in the UK, wasn't it? It was in Manchester.
Oh, was it in the UK? Oh, okay.
It was picked up by the New Zealand press.
Ah, that was it, yeah. And yeah, some of the comments on Twitter and also when it was then shared on Facebook were extreme, to say the least. And some demanded that the original poster shut the hell up because they were so obviously an idiot, going to hell in a handbasket, whatever. And some were even vaguely, or actually not that vaguely, threatening. And so many people seem to assume that it was just a one-sided argument and made no attempt to even entertain the possibility of debate on it. So any thoughts on this? I mean, how do you deal with this whole I'm right, you're wrong, you're an idiot brigade?
We call it in our house the Trunchbull. We call it the Trunchbull effect. So from Matilda, Mrs. Trunchbull, I'm right, you're wrong, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's the kind of attitude people take behind their keyboards. Life's not that simple. Everyone's going to have differing views, but I guess out there you open yourselves up to, if you post things like that or support certain campaigns, that you're going to come across these people and they're going to argue to the death that they're right.
Dave, Hannah, have you come across this type of individual before, and how have you dealt with them?
I've not had anything too bad, to be honest. I mean, I've been involved in conversations like this before, whether it's been gender stereotyping or whether it's been breastfeeding or smoking or whatever. I just try and stay calm, get my point across, and sometimes you just got to accept that people are never, ever going to even try to see things your way and just move on. There really does get to a point where you're just wasting your time by carrying on replying to people.
When I first started out blogging, and we're probably talking maybe over mainly only up to the last year or whatever, I always used to try and have conversation and change opinion and sort of think, oh yeah, this is my view. Wouldn't it be great if you could change people's views on things and get them looking at a different way? But to be honest, now I just can't be bothered. There's certain people who, what's the point of arguing with, or what's the point of trying to put a view across when they're obviously have no interest? So take your example about the blue and pink cards. There's certain people out there who think gender isn't something that should define kids, and blue shouldn't be just for boys and all of this stuff, which I'm in that camp. You've then got other people who want it to remain, or people who don't see why people fight that battle. And when you then get them two people talking, or I say talking, when you get those two people conversing and arguing about it, no one's going to turn around and go, oh yeah, I totally see your viewpoint, I've changed my opinion on the world. So I'm just now, I guess, grumpy and old, and just I can't be bothered to have those conversations because I've had them so many times. Perfect example being all of this stuff we've talked about over the past few years around blogging events and the way they treat dads. I've had that conversation so many times and it hasn't changed anything, that what's the point of talking about it anymore?
You reach a point of diminishing returns, don't you, where, as you say, it feels like you're having an argument with a brick wall. Yes,
a brick wall who is a bit of a prick.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because freedom of speech and all that, but I will defend anyone's right to express their opinion, but sometimes you do think that just because people have the right to free speech doesn't mean they shouldn't also exercise it, or at least perhaps without engaging their brain first. And it's not about whether you agree or disagree with me. It's about whether you can hold a reasoned debate without immediately resorting to playground insults. And it seems that many people these days can't. And I do worry that social media is causing us to lose the ability to actually debate facts rather than simply shouting people down, Mr. Trump.
Watch out, he might be listening to this, Tim. You better watch your back.
If he is, I'm sure he'll let me know on Twitter soon enough. Finally, social media can be a wonderful place, but often a very negative place too, and that's, before you even factor in trolls and the like. So what's the one thing you would do if you were running Facebook or Twitter to make social media a less dark place without curtailing people's freedom to speech excessively? So, Dave, what do you reckon?
Wow, what a question. I think there needs to be more done around consequences. So, we have the classic examples of Facebook taking down photos of breastfeeding because there's half a nipple on show, but then not taking down videos of people being beheaded and stuff like that. So I think there needs to be some type of better process in place for vetting and getting rid of that type of content, and also the people who are putting that content up there. Obviously, there isn't consequences at the moment, or these if there is consequences, many people aren't seeing them. So something needs to be done around that, I think.
I would agree. I think, as Dave rightly says, when a breastfeeding mum's photo gets removed, and yet there is so much absolutely awful content being put onto social media, and people threatening people with death threats and things like this, and you so rarely hear of anything actually being done about it. I mean, I've reported so many tweets and accounts and things for abuse or racism, inciting racial hatred, and nothing gets done. You just get an automated message saying thanks for your report, we're looking into this, and then there was not substantial evidence to take any action. And you just think, but this person was actually encouraging people to go and stab somebody, or to inciting racial hatred against Muslims after a terrorist attack, and you just think there's so much awful stuff on there, and you do what you can to try and report it, and still nothing gets done.
For me, there's got to be a way of verifying the identity of somebody using social media, and you can only sign up to an account by verifying that. I'm not clever enough, and I may be a geek, but I'm certainly not techie enough to work out how you do that, whether it's you can only have one account using your national insurance number or something like that, but that wouldn't work everywhere in the world, I guess. So there's got to be a way of doing it better than at the moment where you can set it up with an email address.
And again, it is a very fine line, isn't it, between freedom of speech and instituting some kind of almost totalitarian state sort of approach. But going on what you said, John, I do wish that someone actually had some teeth and actually did something about threatening or copycat accounts. You do have to be careful not to draw the line too far, but at the same time, I think there's way too much lip service at the moment and not enough action from the social networks. So we talked about outrage earlier, and we've seen what's happened with her, where Twitter took pretty much no action against someone who first impersonated her, then threatened her by impersonating the police, which in itself is a crime, and finally warning her that that they were going to threaten to kill her, and yet Twitter did nothing. So that was cheerful, wasn't it? So that's it for our discussion about the seedier side of social media. If you disagreed with anything we said, do please leave a polite comment for us somewhere and we'll get back to you. But if you're an actual troll, don't waste your time. We're not playing your game. That's it for this episode of the Meet the Parents podcast. We'll be back next week, but in the meantime, here's where you can find the four of us online.
I'm at thedadventurer.com and Twitter at @the_dadventurer.
I'm at buddingsmiles.co.uk and on social media at buddingsmiles.
I'm at daddygeek.co.uk and daddygeek on all social media platforms of your choice.
And finally, I'm at Thatcham Dad, and my blog is slouchingtowardsthatcham.com. So you can download this podcast on iTunes and Android devices, on our website at meettheparentspodcast.com, and via a variety of podcasting apps. You can also follow us on Twitter at Parents Podcast and Facebook at facebook.com/meettheparentspodcast. But no trolls, please. So thanks for listening, and do please join us again next week. Good night.